Okay, so in today's video, we will be talking about ND filters, and whoops, sorry about that, 1 second. There we go. Okay, now we'll be talking about ND filters. First off, sorry, it's a little windy out here, but today we're hitting 60 degrees, so I thought it'd be a good day to go outside, get some sun and some wind. Okay, as we saw in that first shot, the image was completely overexposed, meaning it was white and bright. And why is that? Simple reason is because I am trying to keep a 1/50 shutter, and by following the 180-degree rule, I will want to double my shutter speed to whatever my frame rate is. So since I'm shooting at 24p, double that would be technically 48, but with these cameras these days, they round up. So 1/50 would be the closest I can get to a proper shutter speed. Also, I am shooting my lens wide open so I can get that cool, blurry depth of field look where the background's kind of out of focus, but the subject, me, it's in focus. Artistic choice, you don't need to. I could just raise my aperture, which is what will give you that blurry depth of field look. But since I want to keep it as low as possible, I need to put on an ND filter. So what is an ND filter? An ND filter stands for neutral density filter. Basically, it's just a pair of sunglasses for your lens so that you can shoot in bright sunny conditions and still maintain your preferred shutter speed, aperture, basically so that you can keep those settings correct while still having a low aperture. Now, first things first, do you actually need an ND filter? Most cinematographers, videographers, they will say, well, actually, I really don't know what they would say, but in the beginning, when I first got into this, I would say yes, because all the YouTubers that I followed, the videographers and photographers, they said, yes, you need an ND filter. And to an extent, it's true. I will say that ND filters are tools that can be very useful in certain situations, but is it a must-have to go out and shoot videos or photos? No, you don't need it, but it is going to help you in certain situations. I personally feel that it is a lot more helpful to videographers than to photographers. That being said, it is still useful for photography, and I will go over some tips later in the video. So as I showed you before what the image looked like without an ND filter, let's get back to that image. So this is what it looks like without an ND filter, but with my settings at 1/50, my ISO at its lowest at 100, and my aperture down to 1.8 wide open. Now, you can use an ND filter, or you can crank your shutter. Let's see what that looks like. And boom, this is me cranking the shutter to what I think looks like a properly exposed image. So we should compare this image to the previous image and see if you notice any difference. The thing you'll notice most is the movement, because I don't know, it might seem a little more jittery and jarring. Some people like it, some people don't, but this is the difference. And this is what I mean by saying, do you need an ND filter to go out and shoot videos? No, you could literally go out and shoot videos right now and do it like this, bright daylight. My shutter's at 1/3200th of a second. Like I said, you're mainly gonna notice it in motion. So when people are moving around and doing movements, this is what you'll see. Is it bad? No. Some people might say yes, but I think, hey, you're still getting a nicely exposed image, and that's what matters the most next to your story. Now, we can bring back the shutter down to 1/50, but then we can raise the aperture up. So right now, the aperture is at f13. So looks like a pretty similar exposure to before, but do you notice any difference? Ideally, the main difference you should be seeing is that the background is all in focus because we're shooting at a much higher aperture, meaning everything should be in focus. So you don't get that cool blurry depth of field look, but at the same time, you're still able to maintain your proper motion. But see, it's not as jittery. And I mean, yeah, everything looks pretty normal. The main reason I like ND filters is just so that I can keep that aperture as low as possible, so that we can try to get a shallow depth of field, because to me it just looks cool, but like I said, it's subjective and it's just like an artistic choice at this point. Do I need it? Definitely not. But if I'm paying for a lens that can go that low, then I'm going to use it. That's how I see it. Now that you know what an ND filter is, know that there are multiple types of different ND filters, such as VND filter, which is a variable neutral density filter, which is actually what I'm using. Basically, all that means is that I am able to adjust the strength of the filter. I highly recommend those the most because it just gives you more flexibility and freedom. Aside from that, we also have polarizing ND filters, which this is also one. And basically what that helps with is the skies. It helps darken them to make them more blue rather than all white and blown out like that. Like that's white and blown out, but it helps with the blues, it helps darken them. They say it gives you more vibrance, saturation. I don't know about that. If possible, I would definitely recommend getting a variable ND filter that's also a polarizer because you just have the jack of all trades in one filter that will do everything for you. My opinion. ND filters are definitely helpful for video, but they still have some use cases for photos. I love using ND filters anytime I go out shooting during the day, especially when the sun is out like this and there aren't too many clouds. In bright daylight conditions, I find it very helpful to have a set of filters on me because it's just acting as an extra control of lighting, basically. That's how I see it. It's just another way to control the lighting allowed into your camera so that it's easier for you to complete your shoot and get the results you want. I find it very useful for portrait shoots because for portraits, I'm usually trying to keep my aperture wide open to get that dreamy, blurry depth of field look. So with that, I'm going to need to bring an ND filter so I can just control the light easier. Yes, I can still crank my shutter, but it's nice to have the option to control light coming in from the filter. It's just adding more options, which is very convenient. Now, where I find it really coming in handy for photography is when you're trying to do long exposure photography. Those are the images such as the waterfall or the ocean with a very smooth and silky, just soft look to it. Another example would be the light trails you're seeing in city photography, street photography of cars and the city lights. With long exposure photography, you're keeping your shutter open to allow more light in so that your camera can capture all that motion that's happening. If you're trying to do long exposure photography during the day, especially in bright conditions like this, you need an ND filter because you're not going to be able to properly expose that image well enough without some use of an ND filter to help darken and control the light. So you might have noticed by now, but regarding to photography and videography, ND filters really help with the motion that you're trying to capture and just controlling your light. Now, if you're looking into getting an ND filter, know that there are different sizes that you can get. Most people will recommend you to get the biggest size ND filter that fits your biggest size lens. So for example, your lens might have an 82mm filter thread. That's what you're looking for, the filter thread size. So if it has an 82mm filter thread, you'd be buying an 82mm ND filter to match that lens. And whatever other lenses you have, you would just buy step-down rings so that you can attach those to your smaller lens and still use the same ND filter on that lens. This is what I did originally, and it works. But since then, I've just accumulated more gear and actually have an ND filter for every lens size I have. I personally find it very convenient to have an ND filter for each lens so that it's just less swapping. And then there's the argument of getting what you pay for. You can go on Amazon and find very affordable, cheap ND filters for maybe like $50 to $100, or you can just ball out and get the Peter McKinnon Polar Pro ND filter that's like $250. Disclaimer, I do have that filter. I do love it, but I actually find myself using this filter more often, which is the Sandmark ND filter. Sandmark is known for making great high quality yet still affordable ND filters for their phone collection, but hey, they actually had one for the camera, so I thought that was pretty cool. It does exactly what I want it to do. It's a variable ND filter, so I can adjust the strength of the ND, and it just works. So I have no complaints. I use this for many of my portrait shoots, all of my videos that I'm outside for. If you got money to burn, sure, go for the nicest ND filter out there. If you just want something that works, I would recommend looking at Sandmark or just looking on Amazon and see the reviews. And that's pretty much all I got for ND filters. Like I said, they are a tool in your kit. Every tool has a purpose. If you find yourself needing this tool that will help upgrade your photography and videography game, then I say it's worth the investment. So with that, I hope this video helped you out. If it did, would highly appreciate a like on the video. If you got any questions, leave them in the comment section down below, and I will see you next time.